And like most men, I spend a lot of time thinking about the Roman Empire. Hi, I'm Tyler.
And I'm Sadie with Great Catholic Book Club, and this is
Foundation. Sadie, this is one of your favorite books, right? We're
yes,
very excited about
yes.
this.
Isaac Asimov is one of my favorite authors of all time, and the Foundation series is definitely my favorite series. We're only unfortunately reading the first book for this book club, and I feel that does a violence to the nature and the value of this book.
It really does, because, you get into the second and third book, and, it actually finishes the story. The first book ends on such a cliffhanger. It's very unsatisfying if you stop there. So I recommend that you continue reading. But today, we're going to be very disciplined and work very hard to stick to the first
It's so hard when you're going to talk about it. I constantly have to stop myself because I just want to jump ahead to the rest of the story, the totality of the thing.
What about the mule?
I know.
Goodness.
Okay, we'll get there. Actually, we won't unless we decide to do part 2 or
maybe next
all
year.
that later. Yeah, maybe next year. Yeah. So anyway, this is one of my favorite books.
Yep.
So this book is very heavy on the history. The history, the sweep of history, salvation history, you could say, is the main character of the story. And I love history. I've always loved history. I've always been very fascinated by the circumstances, the chain of events that led us to the present moment. Because you cannot understand what's going on right now in this moment if you have no idea how you got there.
Yeah. You have to know where you came from.
Yes. Which Asimov conveniently kind of dismisses at various points.
He treats it very, very dismissively, very much like it doesn't matter where we came from. And that's a very strange thing about this book.
It is, but it gives me a lot of insight into his mind because it helped me understand what's going on in our world, in our Western society in the moment. Okay, as much as I love history, one of the things I've noticed is there are so many different subjective perspectives to see it from. And those perspectives, you'll get a completely different account of the events. Like, you'll have one thing happen. Well, depending on who's telling the story, who is the hero, who is the villain, whether things that happened were good or bad, like the moral measure of the events, you'll get a dramatically different retelling on each side.
Yep. And we've seen that in our own lifetimes. We've seen the shift from the Eurocentric way that we were taught, like in grade school, to the critical theory that started to come in when we were going through high school.
That happened during our lives.
Right.
We actually saw that. And so people growing up today never got the old view at all, and people older than us never got the new view.
Yeah.
And we kind of straddled this bizarre world.
There's this whole generation of kids who never learned to sing the Nina the Pinta and the Santa Maria song.
Right. But yeah, it's interesting, even the word Eurocentric is a word from the critical theory tradition. So I don't even know what you would call the lens prior to that, but this is the label that the critical theorists, the Marxists, gave to that version of history. But even something like Christopher Columbus, right? Like when we were little kids, we were taught in school that he's a hero, he's the founder of the country. By the time we graduated high school, I was being taught that he was a murderous villain.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there are
a big shift.
Clearly a couple of different perspectives we're getting here. So then I get to college, and my undergrad is in criminal justice, but this is a bachelor's of science, right? And so it was very heavy on the research. It was a sociology degree, basically, but very heavy on the stats and on the research. But all of this, even by the time I got to college, the entire field of criminal justice was taught to me through the critical theory lens, through the Marxist lens.
Yep.
So just imagine trying to understand the field and the history of law enforcement through the lens of oppressor-oppressed. Right? That's obviously going to bias how you understand the field.
Yep.
So that was interesting. That's what I learned.
It's a very subjective lens, both in how it views and in its interpretations, and in the facts it chooses to present.
Yeah. Well, there's a selective, it's not only the perspective that's different, but there's often a very selective inclusion versus exclusion of facts.
Yes.
What facts are you putting into the picture when you're trying to persuade the consumer of the information, of the rightness of your point of view? So, I saw all of that. And then I go to law school,
Mhm.
and this is where I was really struck with the origin question and foundation. So in the novel, humanity, this is set tens of thousands of years in the future.
Mhm.
So humanity has forgotten that it came from Earth.
Right.
We don't know
Mhm.
what planet the human species originated from.
Mhm.
And so the origin question is kind of like a fashionable question in the novel,
Right.
where like rich people with too much time and too much money on their
Mhm.
hands like to play scholar. And so
Mhm.
they will dive into the origin question, but it's kind of a dilettante sort of.
Right.
It's not a serious question.
Yeah, it's not taken seriously. It's a pastime for people with too much free time.
Yeah, and Asimov really has like a dismissive, almost a contemptuous idea that worrying about your origins or where you came from as a species is not a worthwhile use of your time.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so law school was like exactly like that for me.
Right.
And you remember that.
I do, yeah.
That I walked in and so every time like I've gone to school.
I go to school.
Right. Well, because I wanted like to really understand it. I want to talk to my husband and like, get your perspective and like help that illuminate my understanding.
Yeah.
And here I am getting all these foundational law classes and learning, okay, there are basic principles that the entire concept of property rights, the law of property rights, the entire concept of the law of contracts, it's built on certain foundations.
Right.
And I didn't understand what that foundation was or where it came from. It seemed to me very clear, like there's some sort of very defined moral framework that all of this came from.
Yeah.
But darned if I know what that is. And also no one is explaining it to me. And then of course, like in law school, I had a mix of like liberal professors and conservative professors. So when I go to the conservative professors and try to ask what the basis of these laws are, like, well, why is this how contracts are?
Right.
I would almost get like this impatient, annoyed, sort of blank response of, well, because it is.
Right.
It's just obvious. And this is the problem for me with a lot of conservatives. It's not that they're like wrong about what they're trying to conserve. It's that they themselves don't even understand what it is that they're conserving.
Right.
They don't know what the deposit of faith is, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it was almost just this annoyed, like, well, because it's just obvious. And like, I did not grow up in a Christian tradition.
Right.
I didn't grow up in the Western tradition. And so to me, I'm like, no, like it's not, I don't understand why these things you think are axiomatic are the way they are.
And that's so true because there's so many things like in the Western tradition that we take for granted.
Yeah.
Like it's just the air we breathe, it's the water we swim in, it's just up is up, down is down, this is how the world works. And we take that for granted. But when you're not from that tradition, that's gotta seem very alien.
Yeah, like why?
Yeah.
Why is that taken? Because that's not the philosophical or the legal tradition that I know of from the Muslim culture and the Muslim world. It's so different. And so anyway, then I would go to like say, okay, so I'm not getting any answers here. And I'm not even getting that they understand the question that I'm posing.
Right.
So then I would go to the liberal professors and I would say, well, I'm trying to understand what the framework is. And their response was, well, the moral framework underpinning all of this law is the oppression and discrimination and racism and bigotry of the white man. The Western colonialist, like the moral framework underlying this is bad, and it must be overthrown and destroyed. And I was like,
we're not going to explain it. We're not going to tell you what it is, but it's bad.
Well,
it's bad.
yeah, and I was like, I don't think that's true either, because again, I didn't come from a Western tradition, but I can tell you that one of the big differences from the Muslim, the Eastern tradition that I came from versus what I see in the Western tradition is one of those fundamental axiomatic assumptions is this concept of human rights, which is
important.
I kind of feel like maybe that's a good thing. Like it's not just Western oppression that needs to be overthrown, maybe there's aspects of Western culture that should be preserved.
Right.
So anyway, it was just very frustrating for me because I'm like, I'm looking for the origin. I'm trying to understand this. And like, I don't think any of the professors I had could have explained this to me. None of them were historical theologians.
Right.
Right? They weren't More than some of them were philosophers,
right?
But you have to be more than a philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be a theologian.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I went to Franciscan and I got the master's in Catholic studies that I was like, oh, this is the Western tradition. It came from Christianity.
Yep.
And this is the Christian tradition, and this is the deposit of faith and the role of the Catholic Church. Now I understand the underpinnings of why the law is what it is.
Yeah.
But I also understood, like, when I went to Franciscan and I actually learned this stuff, and then all the history I'd ever learned in my life suddenly made sense, I realized Christianity is not obvious. Like, it is. It is obvious, but only if you get to first you have to get to a very sophisticated level of moral understanding.
Right.
There has to be a height of, like, development of rational capacity and inquiry to actually understand how logical Christianity is.
Yeah.
Because I'm not trying to, like, you know what? This is going to be offensive, so maybe I should, like, stop qualifying it all the time. Just say, like, it's not my intent to be offensive, but growing up outside of the Western tradition, the, like, moral underpinning of law in most Muslim cultures, a lot of Eastern traditions, it doesn't require higher order moral thinking to understand, like, that base of, like, here's what's moral. I got a gun and you ain't.
Yeah.
Which is what foundation, it's in foundation.
Right,
it's basically the law of brute force, right? Like, what is moral is, well, if I've got the power, I define what's moral. You don't need to have a sophisticated intellectual understanding to grasp that.
Right.
But if you are entering a world where, oh no, that's not moral, like you're entering the Western society and that's not the way that it's ordered, there are a lot of stages and steps you need to get to that point. And that's when I started to really develop this love and this reverence for the society that Christianity built.
Right.
Because it's very complex and very high order. And it's the most ethical. And when I say prosperous, I don't mean just economically.
Right.
But it is the most philosophically prosperous.
And it's been successful. It's been an incredibly successful approach to morality, to culture, to civilization.
Yeah, and something I've encountered repeatedly, and you and I have talked about this so much, is when you actually talk to people in the Western world, it's just like in Foundation with the origin question. It seems to me that most people who have grown up in the Western tradition, most white people, but not just white, right? Like, most, you can count Hispanic people from South America. You can count, obviously, the African Americans, but, like, at some point, people have forgotten the moral framework that built all of this up in the first place. And if you don't remember that it came from Christianity, you can't keep it.
We have this whole civilization. We have everything that's been built over, a couple thousand years now. And we don't know where it came from. And we just kind of take that for granted.
As it's rotting. You know? And so I see a lot of the parallels with what Asimov was getting at, even though he himself is a virulent anti-religion, like, kind of anti-Christian guy who doesn't appear to realize that he would like to insult and cut off the very branch that he himself is sitting upon. But Asimov's awesome. Like, that's you forgive people. They're glaring, like...
He wrote really good books.
He did write, but he wrote books that could only have come from a mind raised in the Western tradition. And in the Christian tradition. Right? The entire thing. So anyway, that's one of my first reasons why I really love Foundation. And
I love it.
Since coming to the Lord and understanding Christianity, I love it even more. And, like, it has a real practical effect on my day-to-day life. That's the thing. Like, people think philosophy, theology, all this abstract nonsense, like, why do you waste your time thinking about it? It actually affects every single practical decision I make in my life. How I relate to my husband, how I relate to my children, what I choose to do with my time. Every way that I order my life is dependent on history, philosophy, and theology. And if I don't understand that, like, I don't know how to live. So you can't say that this is just a silly dilettante question. Right?
It's arguably the most important question. Where did we come from and where are we going?
Absolutely.
All right, so now it's time to move on to our second topic.
Or I'll talk about the first one forever.
Yeah, so we're gonna move on to our second topic now. Asimov, in Foundation, Asimov makes history itself to be kind of the main character, right? It's not a story like you have characters who come and go. You know, there's Harry Seldon, there's Hardin, there's Mallow. Like, you have these characters who are in the story, but the story itself is the arc of history, right? And so you can look at that, and I know Asimov based a lot of this on the fall of the Roman Empire, and like most men, I spend a lot of time thinking about the Roman Empire.
You really do. It's one of my favorite things about you.
But there's another parallel here that I think is even more important, and that's to salvation history, to the rise of Israel, and how God starts with, Adam and Eve. He goes into the patriarchs, and he starts with this little seed, this little foundation, and he grows it from Abraham, from the single man, into a family, into a tribe, into a nation, and all the while preparing these people for what's coming, for how to fix what went wrong in the garden. And you can see parallels in what Asimov is doing in essentially writing an atheist Bible. Like, he's writing salvation history from an atheistic perspective. That's exactly what you see in the Old Testament.
But yeah, with the Israelites, like, they are charged with guarding the Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
There's a very physical, like, here's the deposit of faith.
Yep.
And they're supposed to carry this treasure and guard it and bring it to a point they don't necessarily understand.
Right.
What point they're bringing it to, right? The Israelites were not told in the beginning that at some point this precious treasure is going to be the seed that spreads through the entire world. Which
is similar to the Foundation. They also aren't told what the end game of all this is.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And this is why we have to read the second book and the third book and the fourth book and the fifth book, because when you see how Asimov creates, like, the feint within the feint within the feint within the feint. Like, I'm not going to get into it, but I highly recommend that you don't just stop at this first book.
Keep going. It's worth it.
Read the whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh, we might have to just do the whole thing
in
some video, if not, like, actually making it a part of the books. But
anyway,
so, yeah, when I look at the story of the Israelites, I think what you're getting at with how Foundation, Asimov thought that what he was doing was loosely basing it on the fall of the Roman Empire and then the years of barbarism and then the rise of the new empire.
Yeah.
But you can definitely look at what the Lord did with the Israelites. You have the fall, right? And then you have all the barbarism of the Old Testament, and the Lord gave that little seed to a tiny fledgling, like almost unprotected and weak small source, and expected them to guard it and get stronger and stronger as they moved along.
Yeah, and that brings us to Asimov's idea of the Seldon crisis, right? In the book, it's this point in history where things have reached a tipping point. The Foundation is in jeopardy, the mission is in jeopardy, and it reaches a point, they let it drift to the point where there's only one option left. Like, there's only one thing they can do, and that is the thing they have to go forward. And, in the book, this is all engineered by Harry Seldon to keep the Foundation on the right path. But we see the parallel both in the Bible and in our real lives. Like, this makes me think of, there's this principle in AA where until you're ready to give up your own human scheming and grasping and trying to do things, with your own terrible ideas, you're not going to stop and just be willing to do what God says you should do.
It's the gift of desperation.
Yes.
Your own dumb ideas have blown up in your face so many times that finally you are defeated enough to give this God thing a chance.
Right.
Like, maybe I should try it God's way. But you're not going to do that until you've run out of all other options. You have to be at a point where all other avenues have failed, and now you're willing to do the craziest thing and just try it God's way. So, like, the Seldon crisis, I think of Noah. And the idea that, you could think of a million different ways to deal with all the sin that was leading up to the flood and the cleansing occurring. But Noah had this gift of realizing, none of those things are going to work. So I'm going to do it God's way.
Yep.
The craziest thing. And to realize like things just drifted and drifted and drifted until building an ark in the middle of the desert turned out to be the only obvious and correct solution.
Or Abraham sacrificing Isaac. Like, he had gone through this whole life, and, Abraham did a lot of things wrong. Like, he made a lot of missteps. There were a lot of times where he did not listen to God. And there were horrible consequences of that. But
even the creation, sorry to interrupt you, the creation of his son Ishmael, right, was a sin. Right. And he was thinking, like, at some point, God is going to call in the dead. Like, he's committed so many sins. You remember watching the Dr. Brandt Petrie thing? On how what he was doing with sacrificing Isaac was a sacrifice of atonement. So he felt like he had to sacrifice Abraham finally because that was the only thing left to do. And just over and over again, you see it with Moses, you see it with King David. You see these biblical characters being put in position where the only option they have is to just follow God. The only option they have is to trust in the Lord and do what God says, because they've already tried to do it themselves, and it was a disaster. Moses ran for 40 years to try to get away from the consequences of his actions and avoid the thing he knew he was supposed to do in the first place. And eventually, his human ideas ran out, and he's like, I guess I better do what this burning bush is telling me to do. And go back. So it's always like the craziest and most unlikely thing, the thing that God wants you to do, turns out to be the only obvious thing you can do. And the same with King David. Like, he dallied about, he wasn't a good father, he didn't pay attention to the things that should have been most important to him, the highest priorities. He wasn't on mission, he wasn't doing what God told him to do, and that led to a horrible civil war. And ultimately that led to appointing Solomon as heir, and then Solomon completing the temple. And that too is drifting into the only obvious solution. Although you would think that the son that he had with Bathsheba would be the least likely child that David would appoint as his successor, because of the history of Bathsheba and how she became his wife, and and all of the there were other women who became his wife in less morally difficult circumstances, and so those children that he produced with those other women might have been more. If you're looking at like worldly wisdom, those children would have been more likely. But things drifted to the point that really the most unlikely child, which was the son he had with Bathsheba, would end up being the one that was chosen. And did this completing work. So you see a lot of points in history where things go to a certain point where it's like doing it the way God is telling you to do it is the linchpin that the entire story turns on. And Asimov beautifully parallels that in ways that are, again, for a writer that was so against God and theology, you know what? It comes down to, if you want to tell a good story, especially about the scope of human history, there's only one story. It's in the Bible. And that's the only story you're going to end up telling again and again. Which brings us to our third point. What is the deposit of faith in real life versus in foundation? In the real life salvation story, the deposit of faith is from God. It's objective truth, the only objective truth, because we were talking about that earlier. Like, there's so many subjective ways to look at history, to look at our lives, and all of them are wrong. God gives us the objective truth about who we are, where we came from, and where we're going. God answers the origin question. He does. He does. He answers it beautifully in a way that is deeply meaningful. And it is all, like, it's telling us where we came from, why we exist, and where we're going, what the ultimate end is. And then all of the practical directions to get ourselves to that end. So that's the real life deposit of faith. And then you have, in foundation, you have the deposit of faith created by Harry Seldon. Which is so, like, shallow and truncated and mutilated. It's in empty comparison to the well, because the deposit of faith, according to Seldon, which is then according to Asimov, is just technological knowledge. It's just like the scientific and technological knowledge. That's all it is. If you have enough fancy high-tech conveniences and power generation, somehow that will give you utopia. Asimov's idea of the deposit of faith does not contain any cultural, philosophical, or relational knowledge or wisdom, like how to actually organize a society, how to live. And I think that his idea was that just the scientific advancement itself somehow carries that within it, as opposed to merely being a byproduct.
Right.
Like, all of our scientific heritage and legacy is a result of our theology and our philosophy.
Yeah.
It's not the original, so it's like a positivist point.
Our culture, our society, our social, our relational, like, all of these things that are like the real deposit of faith have resulted in such an optimization of our culture, of our science, of our technology, that's why we have what we have today. It's not the other way around.
Right.
You know, we didn't invent our way into good relationships and a good, you know, a fair society. Like, it's not even the chicken and the egg. Like, it's relationships come first, then everything follows.
Yeah, it's not like first we discovered germ theory and then we built stable society.
Right.
Although when I read Guns, Germs, and Steel, I was like, that's what this dude actually thinks.
Yeah.
You know, like, people actually think that our scientific knowledge and advancement created or creates the culture. It's actually completely the other way around.
Yeah.
When I look at the deposit of faith, the way it's presented in Foundation, there's definitely, the open question is, okay, the goal is to save the human species from thousands of years of barbarism. Right? And barbarism would be bad. So you have to ask yourself, why is barbarism bad? Why is it objectively a bad thing? And then you realize that what he means by barbarism is not necessarily like humans, you know, getting back to tribal warfare, you know, polygamy, abuse, slavery, like all the horrors of what happens when a culture moves backwards.
Right.
That's not what he's talking about. What he means by barbarism is, oh, they're back to coal and oil as opposed to nuclear technology.
Right.
Like, you know, if that is your only definition of barbarism, and nobody has any idea where they came from, and that doesn't make any difference. The only thing you care about is where you're going, and your technology is the only thing that differentiates a civil society from a barbaric society.
Yeah.
You're going to end up in a lot of ways with like the world we have today, which is where we're seeing like we have such advanced scientific technology, but we have this backslide into acting like human beings, you know, that understand how to actually create like a just and moral and good society that is low on interpersonal conflict. Right? Like, you can't, and if it gets low enough with interpersonal conflict, the value of a society with high degrees of cooperation and enshrinement of rational discourse as the deciding factor of governance, if that isn't high value, your technology isn't going to save you.
Right. You can't invent your way out of a bad society. Like, you can have a good society without technology. Right. You can have a good society with technology. They're independent variables.
Well, this is why in real life the deposit of faith was carried by the monks.
Right.
And so here are these men in the monastic tradition. They're voluntarily embracing like a Luddite life, so to speak, that they're not embracing technology. It's agricultural, it's heavy on the manual labor, it's a rejection of all of that technological advancement, but it instead is so rich in philosophy and theology, like it is elevating the value of the contemplative life, saying like this is the real deposit of faith, it's the real richness of what human beings have to offer. And if you don't preserve this, if we don't have the monasteries, if we don't have a value for the contemplative societies, like you're not going to have anything else in the human species. That has to come first. So it's just so interesting from an atheist perspective. Not that, I mean, oh my goodness, I'm acting like I've known this the whole time. You know, like when I first read this book when I was like 15, 16 years old, I had no idea. And then I went through my own phase of reading Skeptic magazine and thinking that, you know, science is the seed of all rationality rather than, you know, no. The cultivation of rationality had to come first. And so over time, though, and especially in light of the Gospels, with the way that Christian truth illuminates your intellect and actually helps you develop the higher order thinking, then you can really understand these concepts and see where everything came from. And with that knowledge, you can actually fruitfully go where you're supposed to be going. You actually know where you're going.
It keeps coming back to the origin question.
Yep.
You can't know where you're going if you don't know where you're from.
And where are you building anything on?
Yeah, and if you're building a philosophy, a society, if you're building a worldview, for lack of a better word, that doesn't take that question seriously, it can't be good.
It either doesn't take the question seriously
Mm-hmm.
and dismisses it entirely, which is what I've seen a lot of secular humanists,
Yep.
what a lot of atheists, a lot of scientific atheism does. Or if it is concerned with the origin, it posits a like almost a satanic idea of the origin.
Right.
It is what the devil would love for us to think our origins are. You know,
Right.
Oppression and you know, and it's all bad, and the entire Western tradition is just like bigotry. And so if you demonize the origin of the only truly moral and just society we've ever known, you're not going to keep it.
Yeah.
And I love how this book, Asimov, may your soul rest in peace with the Lord, hopefully, or at least you're in purgatory.
Yep.
But he has created a work that is so rich for being able to discuss these subjects of the role of philosophy and theology in the development of the species.
Yeah.
And I love this book. I cannot wait to talk about it with everyone in the book club.
Yeah, this is it's an excellent book. It's an excellent book. I will admit the first time I read it about 8-9 years ago, I didn't like it. We
were newly married.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, look at this. And you were like,
well, at the time I bounced off it because I was so into it. Like, I wanted characters, right? I wanted character development. And this doesn't have that.
Not only that, but I think you liked hard science fiction better too.
Yeah.
Like, you liked the Andy Weir and like you liked science fiction that was practically applicable. And I think a book that seemed to be more about empty history in a way, you know, it was kind of dry.
Well, and for a lot of the reasons that we've discussed here in this video that I could not have articulated back then, it didn't fit. But you know, reading it now, in light of the gospel, in light of salvation history, being able to see those parallels, I have a new appreciation for this book, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I would recommend that everyone read it.
Yeah, and now, like, you can really dive into your love of the history of the Roman Empire. You know, like, I think you didn't make that connection either the first time you read it. Yeah.
So we're very excited to discuss this book with you tomorrow, Monday night, July 28th at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. It's not too late to join. Go to www.greatcatholicbookclub.com/join, and you can sign up there, and we will get you a Zoom link to it in tomorrow.
It's free.
It's free, yep, and everybody's welcome, and we would love to have you there to discuss it with us.
And you'll put the link in the description, too.
Yes.
Right? So people can join that way. Yeah.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you soon.
Yeah, and if you heard our kids yelling and bouncing around and crashing upstairs in the background, that's life. Yeah, they let us talk.
I'll try to edit that out unless it happens while she's saying something brilliant, then it stays in.
I think you're saying something brilliant. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
God bless. We'll see you in the next one.
See you.